All right, so we're in Genesis, and we are in the middle now, if you're reading along with me, of learning just how crazy Abraham's family is. He's got some loons in his family lineage. There's a hereditary problem here, I'm pretty sure. And the same things that Abraham did, Isaac does, and now Isaac's son Jacob does. And and so it's very problematic for anyone to read these stories that are filled with children lying to their parents, deceiving them, and then getting a blessing for it. And it's really problematic, isn't it? And it happens over and over again. The story of a man being in love with a woman, and then she can't have children, so the woman gives him another woman so they can have kids. And it's so foreign to us. Well, it's actually not that foreign, but to people of faith, it's like, how can this be like blessed? It's a craziness. And some of the stories even seem to be like the same story, just with different names. Like, tell the king you're my sister. A man tells his wife, tell the king you're my sister, so it'll go well with me. It's weird. And there are lots of stories like that in Abraham's family. Like lots of them. Like they're all crazy. And I was reading this morning, getting ready for you, the story of Jacob. He's in love with Rachel, and he makes a deal with Rachel's father that if he works for him for 7 years, that he'll let him marry Rachel. So he does that, and then the family deceives Jacob, and he ends up marrying the older sister. Surprise. And says, well, you've deceived me. And so then he says, well, I'll work for you 7 more years if you'll give me Rachel. So now it's 14 years, and he gives him Rachel. Rachel can't have any children, but her older sister Leah can. So Leah has a bunch of kids, and Rachel doesn't have any. And finally, Rachel has a son whose name is Joseph, and we'll talk about Joseph in the weeks to come. But once Rachel has that child, then Jacob, and he wants to take his family and everything that he owns and go back to the land that God promised to Abraham. And Laban says, no, I can't do that. Jacob said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I will stay and work for you, and in exchange, you let me take all of the goats and the sheep that are striped or spotted, and you can have the rest. And Laban says, well, that sounds like a good deal. And so he does it. And what Jacob does, since he's the boss of all the animals, at the watering trough, he puts up these branches with paint on them, so that when the animals go up to get a drink, they become striped, all of them. And Jacob says, okay, I'm leaving, taking everything with me. And God blesses him. He's deceitful in many ways. He deceived his father, he deceived his brother, now he deceives his father-in-law. He's a liar. There's no two ways to look at this. The man's a liar. But he's also lied too. And so the deceiver is deceived. And is that justice? And so this kind of begs the question a lot of people might ask, is God really just? Does he really do what's fair? And it's kind of interesting, the answer that the scriptures give on a consistent basis. spent a lot of my life trying to figure this out. Is God really just? Is he really fair? And I've come to the conclusion that from my perspective of what I believe is true and right and just, the answer is no. That it really, God's understanding of justice is not my understanding of justice. There's no way those two things match. It just doesn't work like that. But that doesn't mean that he's not just. It just means that he doesn't meet my perspective of fair and just. In fact, when it comes to this question, I've learned that it's best not really to argue with God about it. If it seems unfair to you, then it's probably unfair to you. But it's not God's fault. And that is a very difficult spiritual lesson for us to learn. It's really, really deep and hard, but critically important. Most people get to the edge of this bridge and they don't walk across. And as you walk across the bridge, you see how deep the chasm is below you and how great the wilderness is ahead of you. The only way that you can keep walking is to, and here's the key to understanding this, is to trust without understanding. That's a big one. Trust God without understanding. It's a different kind of knowing. We want to, our human part of us, we want to trust God as long as our circumstances kind of work out. But the harder thing is to know that God's plan for Jacob is bigger than Jacob. And God's plans for Ernie are bigger than Ernie. And so there may be some things that happen in my life that I just don't understand. Probably you too. And so the real question is, can I trust God anyway, even when I don't understand? And from my perspective and in my life, the answer is yes, you can. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to trust God, whether you understand or not. And that is a tremendous lesson. That's a great way to begin your new year, to trust God no matter what comes. I'm working on right now reinventing the 2790 series that I produced years ago now, kind of reinventing it so that we can learn together. So starting in, January the 9th, I'm going to have an everyday devotion. That's only 2 minutes. And then a midweek, like 10-minute, think about this concept. And we're going to read all 27 books of the New Testament, everything that Jesus says, everything that Paul writes, the book of Revelation. We're going to do the whole thing in 90 days. It's intense, takes a long time, but here's the advantage that you have. It's recorded. So if you don't want to go as fast as the rest of us are going, you can take your time. And maybe do a reading a week and let it last for, instead of 90 days, 90 weeks. And that's fine. But it's really worthwhile to read the entire New Testament, to really understand and really read for yourself what Jesus is saying and what the New Testament is saying, because that's the basis of our trust and the truth. So I invite you to be a part of that. It'll be on our Facebook stream, and I think some of you get YouTube invitations to it. And I just want to give a shout out to my friend Jack. Found out Jack's watching this. Hey, Jack.